The elevator doors slid open with their familiar soft chime, and Sarah stepped into the quiet hallway of her apartment building. The warm lighting cast gentle shadows along the cream-colored walls, creating the peaceful atmosphere she had grown to love about this place. After 14 hours at the office, navigating board meetings and quarterly reports, all she wanted was to sink into her leather armchair with a cup of tea and forget about the corporate world for a few precious hours. Sarah Martinez had built her life around structure and control. As the CEO of a growing tech company, she prided herself on being prepared for every situation. Her designer handbag contained backup chargers, business cards, and even a small emergency kit. Her apartment was her sanctuary, meticulously organized and perfectly climate-controlled. Everything in her world had its place, and she had worked hard to keep it that way. She reached into her purse as she approached her door, fingers searching for the familiar weight of her keys. The soft leather interior yielded nothing but her phone, wallet, and various business necessities. A small frown creased her forehead as she searched more thoroughly, pulling out each item and setting them on the narrow hallway table beside her door. No keys. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to recall her morning routine. She had been rushing to catch an early meeting with investors from the West Coast. In her haste, she must have left her keys on the kitchen counter. The irony wasn't lost on her. The woman who had backup plans for her backup plans had locked herself out of her own apartment. She tried the door handle anyway, knowing it would be futile. The solid wood door remained firmly closed, as secure as it was supposed to be. Sarah leaned against the wall, her professional composure beginning to crack. The building's front desk closed at 6, and her super wouldn't be available until morning. She could call a locksmith, but that would mean waiting in the hallway for hours. Still dressed in her business suit and heels, the sound of a door opening down the hall caught her attention. She turned to see a man stepping out of apartment 4B, carrying a small child who couldn't have been more than 2 years old. The little girl had blonde curls that caught the hallway light, and she was wearing pink pajamas with tiny elephants printed on them. The man looked to be in his early 30s, with kind eyes and the slightly rumpled appearance of someone who had been focused on more important things than his own reflection. Are you okay? He asked, noticing her predicament. His voice was warm and concerned, the kind of voice that probably read bedtime stories and sang lullabies. Sarah felt a flush of embarrassment. She was used to being the one with all the answers, the person others turned to for solutions. I'm fine, she said automatically, then caught herself. Actually, no, I'm locked out. I left my keys inside this morning. The man shifted the child to his other arm, and Sarah noticed how naturally he held her, how comfortable they seemed together. I'm Jake, he said with a gentle smile, and this is Emma. We live just down the hall. I might be able to help? Sarah introduced herself, though she left out the CEO part. Something about this man's unpretentious manner made her want to be just Sarah. Not the Sarah Martinez whose photo appeared in business magazines. I used to work in building maintenance. Jake explained, approaching her door with Emma still in his arms. Sometimes these older locks can be tricky, but they're not impossible. He examined the door frame carefully, his fingers tracing the edges where the lock met the wood. The thing is, I'd need to get some tools from my apartment. Would you mind keeping an eye on Emma for just a minute? Sarah's first instinct was to say no. She knew nothing about children, had never held a baby, and felt entirely out of her element. But something about Jake's trusting expression and Emma's curious eyes made her nod. Jake gently transferred Emma to Sarah's arms, and immediately Sarah felt the weight of responsibility that came with holding someone so small and precious. Emma studied her with wide blue eyes, then reached up to touch the pearl necklace that Sarah always wore to important meetings. Pretty, Emma said softly, her small fingers gentle on the smooth surface of the pearls. Sarah found herself smiling. Really smiling for the first time in days. Thank you, she whispered back, surprised by how natural it felt to talk to this little person. Jake returned quickly with a small toolkit. and Sarah watched as he worked on her lock with practiced hands. Emma had grown comfortable in her arms, leaning against her shoulder and playing with the fabric of her blazer. The weight of the child was somehow soothing, grounding in a way that Sarah hadn't expected. There we go, Jake said as the lock finally gave way. The door swung open to reveal Sarah's pristine apartment, all clean lines and expensive furniture. Home sweet home. Sarah looked down at Emma, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder. The little girl's breathing was soft and even, and Sarah felt an unexpected reluctance to let her go. "Thank you," she said to Jake. "I don't know what I would have done without your help." Jake smiled and carefully took Emma back, the child barely stirring in the transfer. "It was nothing. We neighbors have to look out for each other, right?" As Jake turned to leave, Sarah heard herself saying, "Wait." He paused, looking back at her with raised eyebrows. "I was about to make some tea. Would you like some? After you put Emma to bed?" Jake's face lit up with genuine surprise. "And pleasure. I'd like that," he said. "Give me about 20 minutes?" Sarah nodded, watching as he carried his sleeping daughter down the hall to their apartment. She stood in her doorway for a moment, looking at her organized, efficient, somewhat lonely home with new eyes. 20 minutes later, Jake returned, and Sarah found herself doing something she rarely did, inviting someone into her personal space without an agenda, without a purpose beyond simple human connection. They sat on her couch, drinking tea and talking about everything and nothing. Jake told her about being a single father, about how Emma had changed his perspective on what really mattered in life. Sarah found herself sharing stories about her work, but also about her dreams, her fears, the parts of herself she usually kept hidden behind her professional mask. As the evening wore on, Sarah realized that getting locked out of her apartment might have been exactly what she needed. Sometimes the best things in life happen when your carefully constructed plans fell apart, when you had to depend on the kindness of strangers who turned out to be exactly the neighbors you'd been too busy to notice. The locked door had opened. More than just her apartment, it had opened a door to a connection she hadn't even known she was missing.